careful, Teresa. That elite was an ultra.
In the Book of Mormon, a group of Gadianton robbers commandeer airplanes and crash them into King Benjamin's tower, which falls magically into its own footprint, and all of the Nephites are just bewitched, and thus they know that they must declare war on the Lamanites, and an endless war ensues on the Lamanites, wherewith the people's treasury is depleted, and they lose sight of God. That's not in the Book of Mormon. Ezra Taft Benson, he talks about how in the Book of Mormon there is no conspiracy theory, but a conspiracy fact. I like that quote. I think it's very interesting. I think it's very curious indeed that the Book of Mormon dwells so much on this idea of Gadianton robbers and how they sabotage the government of the Nephites. And the narrator, Mormon, he thought this was very important to include and to focus on because he abridged thousands of years of history. He abridged thousands of years of history and could have focused elsewhere. But what he wanted to focus on was the Sons of Mosiah and Alma the Younger's missions to the various cities and Lamanite cities. Grant Hardy likes to call it the Nephite Reformation, and I find that to be a useful term, as well as the war chapters. And then there's all this stuff about secret combinations. It occupies quite a bit of the book, and I've always found that extremely curious. And I feel like it hasn't been focused on as much as it used to be. In Ezra Taft Benson's time, we were in this period called McCarthyism, in which we were 100% convinced that communists were infiltrating the government, and there were many confirmed communists who were found. Nowadays, we know that this was all just hysteria, and there were no communists to be found. That this was just hysteria, and that's what you'll learn in public school. They're going to make your kid read a book called The Crucible, which is about the Salem witch trials, but it's actually about McCarthyism and how it was all fake. And those are the kind of things that they'll teach you in public school. But McCarthyism, they were really finding spies. There really were spies. Like, there was the economist, White, I think his name was, this is not conjecture, like he was literally confirmed to be a spy. His name is White. Fellow White, maybe. Something like that. But, so yeah, that's McCarthyism. Very, very interesting. And so, sometimes when I'm reading the Book of Mormon, or rather, in growing up when I read the Book of Mormon, I became determined that I wanted to figure out what exactly was going on with this whole secret combination stuff. And for a while it became my hobby to kind of study conspiracy theories. I thought it was really interesting. I think they're all worth looking at. A lot of them are pretty fun, honestly. It just kind of became a very interesting hobby of mine to step into the shoes of a totally different worldview. I remember watching this video where this guy has an elaborate story about how that literally, basically it came down to like the national treasure in the movie, you know. Like there's some national treasure, is like the Templar treasure gold was hidden in the basement of WTC 1 and 2, and that what we saw, what appeared to be some sort of attack, was in fact a gold heist, after which the guy plugged his business in which he sold gold, and I found that extremely funny. We have this problem that there is a secret combination, and I think that we, as members of the church, need to be aware of that. I think there's a lot to be gained by studying different perspectives, because we live in a world where there is so much information that you can carve any narrative that you want out of the existing information. And I'm probably guilty of this as much as anyone else. But like carving a sculpture, you can simply remove or ignore the information that is not needed, and you can create any form or shape or narrative structure that you need and to suit your purposes. But Mormon, he was convinced that we needed to be aware of this, and I really like the Book of Mormon because it kind of forces us, as modern people, we have a very rigid understanding of the world and of truth and of history, and by accepting the Book of Mormon as the Word of God and as a true account of real historical peoples, it puts us into this strange situation where we have to accept that at least some of archaeology is very wrong or misled somehow, that the history of the world is not what we are told. And that as we buy into the story of the history of the Book of Mormon and the Book of Mormon people, we learn that things are not always as they seem, and the Nephites fell because they were not able to see what Mormon could see. And he wants to make it abundantly clear to us, the readers, as to what was going on with this gang of robbers. But to the Nephites in the moment, I'm sure many of them were very blind to what was occurring. And we can see this with some of the interactions that happened between Nephi, not first Nephi, but the other Nephi who prayed on his tower, and some of his interactions with the people. But there seems to be a lot of focus on this, and it is deeply important to Mormon, and I have often pondered on it. And for a long time, I would study different alternative histories and push your mind to the point that you feel a little bit crazy, and then reel it back, read the Book of Mormon again, and take what you've learned and go to the next wild out there theory. And by doing this many times, I feel like there is something to be learned. And I don't recommend anyone goes full bore into any one idea, because that can open you up to being controlled by. I mean, it's well known that some of these different ideas are put out by glowies, I guess, to use the internet term. But the leaders of our church have talked endlessly about the dangers of communism and have identified communism as the secret combination. Yet we know that while in Ezra Taft Benson's day, the government and Hollywood and these institutions were being overrun by communists, we know now that that was all a witch hunt. That's the official. That's what you learn in school. So it was just a witch hunt. And Ezra Taft Benson, he was just a kook. You know, he was with the John Birchers, and he was just wild and crazy. You know, and anyone who thinks that a pencil factory owner has something to do with Ezra Taft Benson and with Utah politics in the 21st century, anyone who thinks that there's some connecting thread between those three things and perhaps a spy ship or a president whose head exploded because he had syphilis spontaneously, or I don't know, these vanishing towers. We lost a couple skyscrapers. I don't know where they went, but anyone who even begins to even think for a second that maybe the world is not what it appears to be, that's crazy. And I feel like the Book of Mormon, once you truly accept it as the truth, it forces you to accept that the world is not what it appears to be. And that's probably, in my opinion, it's one of its most useful features. And it's not the most useful feature. Obviously, the most useful features is how it's enlightening to you and it can develop your character. But you know all that. That's not what we're here to talk about, because that's no fun. So anyway, I guess the main point of this video is just, I see a lot of people who are members of our faith, and they seem to get, because our leaders in the past spoke out against communism, they seem particularly vulnerable to a type of messaging that comes from these snakes. Like, in particular, who comes to mind is this James Lindsay character. And this James Lindsay guy is an atheist. Okay, he doesn't believe in God, and he constantly talks about a word called Gnosticism, which he's not talking about historical Gnosticism. He's just using it because Christians have been trained to react to the word Gnosticism as something that is bad, because everything that's esoteric, hidden knowledge, you know, traditional Christians, they don't like that. And anytime you hear a word and you have like an emotional reaction to it, that's from brainwashing, okay? So he just says the word Gnosticism and it gets people riled up. And what is he exactly talking about? He's talking about mysticism, esotericism. I don't even know what he's talking about. But certainly our entire religion would fall under the definition of Gnosticism. Our God, like our conception of God as a creator from existing materials, he's like a benevolent demiurge. That's how the demiurge works. So I really don't like James Lindsay. I think that he uses the word communism and it like hijacks hijacks people's brains because they've been trained to react to particular words in particular ways, and we just need to be very careful about that. So I just wanted to talk about the Book of Mormon and the phrases that Mormon thought that we should focus on, and what he used to describe these robbers, I suppose, and the types of people that he warned us against. And I would argue that James Lindsay, he falls under the umbrella of all these different terms, but I have a list here. There's the Lamanites, who are idlesome, they're cannibalistic, they're violent people, they don't work with their hands, they're not agrarian, they're just kind of idler, loitering types. There's the Gadianton robbers, who are thieves. They don't farm, they don't produce, they only steal, they murder. Everything is for their personal gain. We're warned about corrupt chief judges. We're warned about corrupt lawyers, corrupt high priests specifically, which is interesting. In the pride cycle, merchants come into the land. Many officers is another term that's used. And then we're also warned against the friends and the kindreds, which would mean the family or the perhaps ethnicity of these lawyers, high priests, merchants, corrupt judges, robbers. It's their kin. That's how Mormon describes them. We're also told a lot about two characters named Zeezrom and Antiona, who Mormon spends all this time explaining the entire currency system so that we will understand that their names are denominations of currency in the current system. There is an Ezrom and an Antion, which are denominations of silver and gold. And these two characters are contrasted, and the conversion of Zeezrom is miraculous, but the conversion of Antion, and presumably all the other monetarily named lawyers, they are not converted. The vast majority of them are not converted. So I like that he includes the story of Zeezrom so that we know that redemption is possible for these people. But largely, these lawyers are very dangerous. And without intervention from God, they're serpents that we need to watch out for. We're told about these robbers, like specifically the letter between Gadianton and Piankai, if I'm saying that right. He invites him to be his brother. They talk about all these historical grievances. Our ancestors were wrong, and because of that, we are owed something. And we see that attitude a lot in today's world, that your ancestors, they hurt my ancestors, and because of that, you owe me, and you are lesser. And this is just a toxic attitude to have. I don't think we should harbor these kinds of emotions towards people. We should try and live like the Nephites. And the Nephites, they wanted to keep to themselves and build a community and just live their life with their families, and that's what we should strive for. So another group that we're warned against is Zoramites. And Zoramites are technically a subset of Nephites, but they're a little bit different. They're of the original 7 tribes of Lehi. They're unique. They're descended from this servant of Laban, and they are particularly vicious. They are particularly tricksy, I suppose is a word, and they are constantly, while they appear to be Nephites, they are constantly riling up these Lamanites to attack the Nephite people. There's also all sorts of traitors like the Amlicites who mark themselves apart on their foreheads. They renounce their Nephiteness by marking themselves with Lamanite marks. And so they denounce their Nephite heritage and begin to attack the Nephites. There's various antichrists. There's the whole religion of the Nehors. We are warned specifically against secret works of darkness, though we're given very little hint as to what exactly those are. But we do know that Nephi refused to teach his people how to understand the words of Isaiah, specifically because he was afraid of them learning something about these so-called works of darkness, or these doings of abominations is another phrase. There's pride, riches, women, with the whoredoms, and there's that daughter of Jared who's like a real piece of work. And yeah, so that's the secret combination of the Book of Mormon. I really like the phrase, the secret combination of the friends and kindreds of those who murdered the prophets. I think that sums it up. So those are the types of people that we need to look out for. It is a group of family and friends. And so yeah, that's the Book of Mormon. It is the perfect tool to develop your mind, to be able to see the world as it really is. And as you explore some of these different perspectives, things like this documentary, the Who Killed Joseph Smith documentary, is just so ridiculous. As an expert in the genre of conspiracy theories, it doesn't hold water at all. And I would really like to see what the makers of this Who Killed Joseph Smith film, I would love to hear what their takes are on some of these other very controversial historical ongoings and what their explanation of what occurred on some of these dreadful days in human history. Even something as innocuous as Pearl Harbor, I don't believe is exactly what we've been told. So yeah, that's my question for the Who Killed Joseph Smith guys is, do you know what Jack Ruby's real name is? There's these people on YouTube who talk a lot about the pyramids and alternative history, and how like the rocks at the pyramids are extremely precise and they couldn't have been made with brass hammers, essentially. And I agree. I think that there's something very mysterious there. But the tendency of these types is to do a bunch of LSD, and then they're like, whoa, man, I like unlocked the secret, and they were like using harmonics, and that's how they did it, man. Like, whoa, man. And it's really just cringe. So don't listen to or trust anyone who is big into like the mushrooms. I think that unless they have like a proven track record of not being possessed by some sort of machine elf, then basically everything they say is suspect. We can't even go there. In addition to psychedelics, there are very dangerous weapons of creating consensus in today's world, which is like the upvote, downvote systems that you see on sites like Reddit or basically everywhere now. And that is that the most popular opinions are held up as the most true because they must be getting the most attention, because anything that is getting attention is getting catapulted into the stratosphere in terms of exposure. This means that if something is true, then it's not going to be able to get that exposure if it's controversial, if it's an uncomfortable truth. Mormon, this is basically what he constantly warns us about, that the ideology of these Nehors or the Korihor types, the people at the city of Ammonihah, whose city was destroyed, their ideology is popular and it makes them money. And they continue to preach it because it is how they sustain themselves economically, is by pushing these narratives onto the people and keeping them trapped in a false reality, essentially. And so that is your lesson for today. I think I don't want to tell you what to believe. I just want you to be very skeptical of people who are going on about critical race theory and communism, because I think they are using those words to try and get you to do something or believe something that is not actually in your interest. While I do agree that communism is very bad, and that critical theory as created by these Frankfurt School types, all these people who got kicked out of Germany in the early 1900s, they all got kicked out for some reason. I don't know why. It must have been because their ideas were so awesome. Yeah, they came here and they told us how awesome their ideas were, but we go on and on about the critical theory. Quick guy, what's his name? Mattson talks a lot about it. I honestly, when I listen to him, I honestly feel like I'm listening to James Lindsay, and it's really frustrating because I don't feel like James Lindsay is on our side. James Lindsay is an atheist. Jordan Peterson is a drug-addicted atheist, essentially. Okay? If your voice quivers when someone asks you if you believe in Jesus, maybe you should get that checked out. Anyway, Jordan Peterson basically lost his credibility once he turned on the incels and Pepe, That's when I felt personally attacked. So anyway, that is your lesson for today. The Book of Mormon, it is the ultimate tool to understand reality. By accepting the Book of Mormon, it forces you into this strange liminal space between the modern world, which is a world of answers and facts, and I will Google it, and then the Google will tell me the answer, and that is the truth because it's on Reddit and it has upvotes. It forces you to walk the path that's between that world and the world of, whoa, man, look at these pyramids, man. Like, I don't think they could have made these with brass hammers, man. And we must glean the truth from both sides of the aisle. And I do, as far as the pyramids go, I do think that those are very suspicious for sure. The granite, they say, it was all turned on a lathe, and these little vases that are made out of granite, which is just mind-boggling. I don't know how they made them. I don't think that we could make those until very recently. And yet, there are disc maces, or maybe it's not a disc mace, or some of the doorways are very small. And so it's all just very mysterious to me, and I like to keep an open mind. I think that's what we need to do. And if you want to be really open about something, you have to be able to go all the way. You have to be able to consider the very worst. In our church culture, we have this faux culture of questions and answers. Oh, if you have any questions, just be free to ask. And it's like, well, you aren't willing to go all the way with me. And so any amount of question and answers is just entirely unproductive, because if we can't consider both options, there's really no point in asking questions at all. Just tell me what to believe. If we can't really consider, I guess, option B or worst case scenario, just for 10 minutes. Let's just consider it for 10 minutes and then see where that takes us. And if we can't do that, then just tell me what to believe. But we seem to have this kind of pretend, oh, we're going to do a Q&A, guys, and okay, here's a question. It's, how do I tell the Spirit from myself? Okay, let's talk about that for 45 minutes. Wow, I'm so glad. Look how open we are. Look how many questions we answered. It's like, that's not a real question. That's like, this is a room of adults. This isn't 12-year-old, like, this isn't deacon's quorum. Like, I think you need to have figured that out by now. You know, you need to be able to have confidence in your ability to receive revelation. And if you haven't got that yet, then I don't know how to help you as a 50-year-old man. If you're asking that question in Fifth Sunday, then I just don't know how to help you. So yeah, be very careful in this world of information. I think that information is very, well, you should be skeptical of it. I think it is treacherous, I suppose. Information is treacherous. That's how I would put it. And the Book of Mormon is the perfect book for helping you to develop that mindset. And so those are my thoughts for today. And yeah, have a good one. Stay faithful.